In this video, we dive deep into the painful yet powerful truth about the consequences of losing something irreplaceable. Have you ever walked away from someone or something precious, only to realize too late what you've lost? This story will take you through the raw emotions of regret, realization, and the unspoken lessons that come when we make choices we can't undo. If you've ever wondered about the weight of decisions made in haste, or the truth behind why some people can't come back into your life once they're gone, then this video is for you. Stay with us until the end, because the lesson you're about to learn might just change the way you see life, relationships, and the consequences of your actions forever. Don't miss out on discovering how the choices we make shape our reality. Watch now. Before we start, I'd appreciate your support. If you liked the video, please subscribe and hit the bell to stay updated on future lessons from God. The narcissist's grand delusion is the devastating belief that they stand above the consequences of their actions. With chilling certainty, they move through the world as though it owes them something. As if they are immune to the laws that bind others, both human and divine. Cloaked in arrogance, they deceive, manipulate, and discard others without a second thought, assuming that they will always be the one who walks away unscathed, untouched by the harm they inflict. Their actions are insulated in a bubble of self-righteousness, utterly disconnected from any sense of responsibility. In their distorted reality, they are the masters, and power belongs only to those who take what they want, exploiting without remorse, silencing their conscience in their insatiable pursuit of desires that have no regard for anyone else's needs or feelings. This is the ultimate illusion of the narcissist, their foundational lie. They have convinced themselves over time that they are above all consequences, above the judgment of both man and God. They blind themselves to the weight of their choices, for in their narrow view, there have been no immediate repercussions, no punishment, no reckoning. For too long they have lived in a false paradise, one that has allowed them to believe that their actions are invisible, that their transgressions are untraceable. But what they fail to grasp, what they fail to see, is that justice is patient. It does not arrive in the frenzy of an instant, but waits, often unseen, like a storm slowly gathering on the horizon, its winds gathering force in the silence. The narcissist, blinded by their sense of invincibility, believes that because judgment has not yet arrived, it never will. They confuse the stillness of silence with approval, the delay of justice with an escape. Yet they have missed the most critical truth of all. God is never mocked. Every seed they have planted in the soil of deception, every lie they have told, every betrayal they have orchestrated, every selfish act they have committed, is waiting for its appointed time to bear fruit. The scales of justice will not remain tipped in their favor forever. When the accumulated weight of their choices becomes too much to bear, the collapse will come, not in the form they expect, not in the way they can manipulate or control, but in the way that God Himself has ordained. And here lies the cruelest irony of all. They thought they were in control. They believed they were untouchable. They assumed that because they had successfully manipulated, deceived, and used others in the past, they could continue to do so with impunity, indefinitely. What they failed to see, what they failed to understand, is that their fleeting triumphs, their hollow victories, were nothing but borrowed time. Every moment they lived without facing consequences was an extension of God's mercy, a final opportunity for change, for repentance, for redemption. God had placed you in their life, not as a victim, not as an afterthought, but as a messenger, a divine warning. You were meant to be their last chance, their opportunity to turn away from their destructive ways, to see the error of their arrogance. But rather than take the gift of grace that you offered, they doubled down on their pride, choosing deception over truth, self-worship over humility, cruelty over compassion, just like Pharaoh, whose heart was hardened against the very God who sought to save him. Just like those in Noah's time who mocked him as the floodwaters rose around them, they rejected the hand of mercy extended to them. And now, the illusion they built, this world of self-deception, this house of cards they thought was unshakable, is beginning to crumble. At first, they don't see it. Judgment, after all, doesn't always come with a thunderclap. Often, it arrives quietly, like a whisper in the wind, a slight change in the air, a subtle shift in the balance of power. It's the first sign that their fortress is not as impregnable as they believed. People who once believed in them and trusted them now begin to see through the layers of deceit they've carefully constructed. The relationships they once took for granted, those they exploited, begin to fray, to unravel. The respect they demanded no longer holds the same weight. The power they once wielded no longer produces the same effects. What came easily to them now feels forced, like pulling against the tide. This is the beginning of their fall. But the narcissist, still entranced by their illusion of superiority, refuses to see it. They cling desperately to the hope that they can outwit, outlast, or outrun the inevitable. But they are wrong. No one can escape the justice of God. No amount of manipulation, no degree of deceit, and no clever maneuvering can evade the laws that God has set in motion. The very web they created to control others will become their trap. The people they once dismissed and discarded will move on, leaving them behind. And when they reach out for replacements, they will find that nothing and no one will ever measure up to the illusion of control they once held. The lies they used to shape their world, to form their reality, will become the very chains that bind them. And when the reckoning finally arrives, and it will be too late. They will stand alone amidst the wreckage of their own making, reflecting on the opportunities they rejected, the countless warnings they ignored, the people they betrayed, and the lies they believed, and the most painful, soul-crushing realization of all will dawn on them. They did this to themselves. Have you ever wondered why God placed you in your life? Why, of all people, were you the one who had to endure their manipulation, their cruelty, their betrayal? Why were you the one who saw through the facade they so carefully built? Why were you the one who recognized the brokenness in them, the fragility behind their arrogance? Why were you the one who tried, against all odds, to offer them love, patience, and guidance, despite their mistreatment of you? It was not a coincidence you were sent. God does not allow his people to walk through the fire of abuse, deception, and cruelty without purpose. He does not place his children amid such darkness without a divine reason. You were meant to be the light in their darkness, the reflection of truth they could not see, the voice of reason they chose to ignore. And in doing so, you fulfilled a purpose far greater than they will ever understand. You were more than just a person in their life. You were a divine warning, a message from God, an opportunity for salvation that they could not see nor understand. You were placed in their path as their last chance before the consequences of their actions descended upon them. Throughout Scripture we see time and time again how God sends his messengers to offer a final call to those lost in their sins. Noah warned the people of the flood that would wash away their complacency, but they ignored him. Moses stood before Pharaoh, demanding the release of God's people, only to be met with defiance. Jonah was sent to Nineveh, calling for repentance before the wrath of God fell upon them. Even Jesus himself walked among the Pharisees, offering them redemption before the destruction of Jerusalem. Each was a test, a moment of grace, an invitation to change. And now, in a modern world that has convinced itself it is beyond the reach of divine accountability, God still sends his messengers, not on mountaintops, but in everyday people like you with extraordinary purposes. You are not just someone they happened to meet, someone to pass the time with, someone who was easy to manipulate. You are a mirror they refused to look into, The voice of reason they chose to ignore, the silent reminder that their actions would not go unpunished. You were the grace they longed for, the love they claimed to want but could not accept, the patience they insisted they were worthy of but could never truly embrace. You were the very embodiment of everything they lacked, everything they tried to tear down with their arrogance. But instead of embracing the divine message you brought, they did what narcissists do best. They rejected it. They dismissed your love, belittled your kindness, and brushed off your warnings. But their rejection does not erase the truth. It does not undo the fact that God placed you in their life as a last-ditch effort to break through their hardened hearts. They ignored the message, but that does not change the fact that it was sent. And now, as time marches on, as their carefully constructed world begins to unravel in ways they never expected, they will remember you. They will recall the words you spoke to them in love, the patience you extended when they showed none, and the kindness you offered even when they rejected it. And the most haunting realization of all will settle upon them. You were their test, their divine opportunity, and they failed. This is the truth they never anticipated. They believed they could treat you however they wanted, manipulate you, discard you, and move on with no repercussion. But what they failed to realize is that rejecting a divine warning doesn't just reject a person, it rejects God Himself. They thought they had the upper hand. They thought they were playing the game, controlling the narrative and winning. They assumed they could walk away unscathed, thinking that no consequences would come. But now, as their carefully built illusions begin to crumble, they are starting to realize the harsh truth. You were never just a person in their life. You were the messenger. You were the warning. And now that warning is unfolding exactly as God intended. The consequences they never expected are slowly creeping in, and they are about to face them, whether they are ready or not. When someone turns away from God's message, they are not just rejecting a person, they are turning away from divine protection. At first they feel victorious, they feel untouchable. They think they have won because there are no immediate consequences. They march forward in arrogance, blind to the looming storm, convinced that life will continue as it always has, without any real reckoning. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. But what they fail to understand is that God's justice is not always immediate, but it is always inevitable. Consequences do not always arrive with the blare of sirens or the crack of thunder. Often they begin in silence, creeping in like the slow unraveling of a tightly wound thread. At first, it is subtle, a slight shift in their life that they barely notice. The people who once revered them now keep their distance. The opportunities they took for granted slowly began to dry up. The sense of control they once wielded like a weapon begins to slip through their fingers, and the grip they had on their world begins to loosen. But then the emptiness sets in. They may not be able to put a name to it, but they will feel it. A void, an ache deep within them that nothing can fill. They will try to soothe the pain with new relationships, new ambitions, and new distractions, but none of it will work. No matter how many people they replace, or how many successes they chase, nothing will ever satisfy them, because what they lost can never be replaced. This is the painful truth that narcissists and manipulators never understand. When God places a blessing in your life, and you reject it, you do not walk away unscathed. You walk away with a deep, irreplaceable deficit, a void that no new person, no new accomplishment, and no new indulgence can fill. They believed that your love, your patience, and your loyalty were common things, easily found again. They thought they could move on, easily discarding you, only to find that what they threw away was priceless. As they search for substitutes, They will come to realize that nothing they find will ever compare to what they lost. They mocked you, but now they will feel the weight of your absence. They dismissed you, but now they will see the stability you brought into their chaotic lives. They assumed that without you their world would remain intact, but soon they will realize that you were the thread that held everything together. The truth they rejected is now becoming their reality, and when they finally understand the cost of their choices, it will be too late. They treated you as if you were replaceable, an object that could be discarded without a second thought, but now they are faced with the crushing truth. What they lost was irreplaceable. At first, they try to deny it. They silence the nagging thoughts that begin to creep into their minds. They tell themselves it doesn't matter, that life goes on, that they are better off without you. But regret is a persistent shadow that follows those who reject God's warning. It waits patiently for the quiet moments, for the stillness of the night, for those rare spaces where they once felt secure, where the noise of their arrogance fades and the truth can no longer be avoided. In the early days, they might have managed to convince themselves that nothing was lost. They surrounded themselves with distractions, with people who only confirmed their delusion. But as time moves forward, the weight of their choices begins to press down on them. It starts subtly, like a heaviness in the chest, an uneasy feeling that grows and grows. They might try to ignore it, try to outrun it, but they can't. It lingers, always there, a reminder of the decision they made to push you away. And then, one day, it all comes crashing down. The realization fully hits them, and they are forced to confront the truth. They see it all, the arrogance, the pride, the foolishness that led them to turn away from what was real and good. They remember the moments when they had the opportunity to change, to make different choices, to choose humility and love over self-absorption and pride. And as they look back on it all, they see you. They see the warning they ignored, the test they failed, the moment when God gave them a choice and they chose the wrong path. They finally understand the magnitude of their mistake, but by then it is far too late to undo the damage, too late to reclaim what they once had. The most painful truth of all, by the time they recognize what they lost, it is gone forever. They thought they could replace you, that you were just another fleeting chapter in their life, easily turned and forgotten. In the beginning, they didn't even hesitate to discard you. In their distorted perception, you were just another name, another person, another presence they could throw away without consequence. They never stopped to consider the weight of their actions, because their entire life has been built on the belief that relationships are disposable, that loyalty is nothing more than a fleeting illusion, and that the world will always offer them more chances, more people, more opportunities to do as they please. In their arrogance, they dismissed you as insignificant, convinced that someone else would come along, someone better, easier, more compliant, someone who would fill the void you left behind. But they were wrong. It didn't happen all at once, though. At first, they felt a sense of satisfaction, maybe even relief, as if they had made the right choice, as if letting you go was a step forward, a liberation from something they deemed unnecessary. They walked away, head held high, convinced that life would continue as they had designed it. Their belief in their superiority blinded them to the fact that their choices were leading them down a path toward destruction. They assumed that because they had convinced themselves you were replaceable, it must be true. They assumed that the world would always bend to their will and that they could control every outcome. But what they failed to understand, what they will now be forced to learn, is that when you discard something God has given you, something that was meant for you, there is no replacement. Nothing can take its place. At first, they may not notice the shift. Life continues as it always has. Distractions fill the empty spaces. New relationships briefly provide comfort, and the reckless behaviors they indulged in continue to mask the truth. But then something begins to change. They feel the emptiness, the void, the subtle unraveling of their carefully constructed world. It starts small. Maybe it's the way the people they surround themselves with don't bring the same warmth, or the way the joy of their pursuits begins to fade. It's a feeling, a growing sense that something is missing, but they can't pinpoint it. And no matter how hard they try to fill that void with new things and new faces, nothing satisfies. The truth will slowly seep in. They didn't just lose you. They lost the only thing that could have truly fulfilled them, the only thing they ever had that was real. And now they must live with the consequences of their blindness, their pride, and their decision to throw away what was never meant to be replaced. They meet new people, one after another, only to realize with growing despair that the deep connection they once had with you is nowhere to be found. The trust they once took for granted, the unwavering foundation of understanding and support, is no longer available to them. They search for that same sense of security in others, but it always falls short. They try to recreate what they had with you, but what they lost was never just a relationship. It was a divine presence in their life, a gift of grace that cannot be replicated or replaced by anyone or anything. No matter how hard they try, they will never find the same depth of connection, the same peace, or the same unwavering loyalty. That connection was sacred, and now it's gone. This is the moment they never saw coming. They thought they could walk away without consequence, that life would go on as if nothing had happened. They believed time would fade their actions, that new people would fill the void they left, and that the world would continue to bend to their will. But reality does not cater to their delusions. It is governed by divine laws, laws that hold them accountable. And when you mistreat a blessing, when you discard something sacred, you don't just get to move on without facing the consequences. The universe, under the watchful eye of God, ensures that no action goes unaccounted for. At first, they try to ignore it. They push away the creeping unease, convincing themselves that they don't care, that they've moved on. But regret is a relentless force. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for an invitation. It arrives unannounced, like a shadow creeping into the quiet moments, when they are left alone with their thoughts and memories. And when it does arrive, it doesn't whisper, it shouts. It forces clarity into their mind, breaking through the walls of their self-deception. They finally see it. Their mistake, their foolishness, the weight of their choices. They didn't just lose you, they lost something far more precious, the favor of God that came with your presence. This is the part that will haunt them the most. They will be unable to escape the truth that deep down they had something rare, something sacred, and they destroyed it. They will recall the countless moments when you extended grace, when you forgave them, even when they didn't deserve it, when you stood by them, when anyone else would have walked away. They will remember every single opportunity they had to change, to do right by you, to make amends. They will relive the times they rejected the warning that God had placed in front of them, the many chances they were given to turn things around, only to ignore them in their arrogance. And the most painful realization of all will settle in. By the time they truly understand what they had, it will be too late to reclaim it. They will try, they will test the waters, sending subtle messages, looking for ways to reconnect, hoping that somehow you'll come back into their life. But what they fail to understand is that when God removes someone from your life, He does not intend for them to return. They may have thought they were making a choice, but in reality God had already made His decision. He saw what they could not see. He heard what they chose to ignore. And when the time was right, He removed you from their life, not as a punishment to you, but as a judgment on them. He removed the presence of favor that had been given to them, knowing that they would never truly appreciate it. Now they are left to face the void that they can never fill. They will search for you in every new person they meet, but they will never find another you. They will try to replicate the connection they had, but it will always fall short, because what they lost was never just a person, it was the presence of God's favor. And that presence has left them now. They are left alone, confronted by the emptiness of their own choices, unable to fill the gap with anything or anyone else. No new relationship, no new success, no new distraction will bring back what they lost. The final, irreversible realization comes crashing down on them. It's too late to turn back. Regret, in all its brutal honesty, is a cruel teacher. It doesn't arrive when it's convenient or when they feel ready to face it. No, regret shows up when it is unbearable, when they are too far gone to reverse course. At first, they don't recognize it. They try to distract themselves, telling themselves that life will continue as it always has, that time will heal the wound they've caused. They jump into new relationships, new indulgences, new escapes, thinking that whatever they lost can be replaced. They tell themselves that their choices were justified, that their actions had no real impact, and that walking away was the right decision. But in their heart of hearts, they know the truth. They know that they lost something irreplaceable, and no amount of distractions will ever bring it back. And so they are left trapped in their regret, unable to undo the damage, unable to fill the emptiness that they once filled. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. But no one escapes the truth forever. In the quiet of the night, when the distractions of the day fade and the noise dies down, the weight begins to settle, slow and inevitable. It starts as a whisper, a fleeting thought, a quiet discomfort that they can't quite place. They try to dismiss it, to push it aside, just as they once pushed you away. But the discomfort does not vanish. It lingers in the silence, slowly creeping into their every waking moment, growing heavier with each passing day. They cannot outrun it, no matter how hard they try. The realization does not come in a single moment, but in fragments. Small pieces that fall into place when they least expect it. A familiar phrase that you once said. A kindness from a stranger that mirrors something you once gave them. A situation that forces them to remember you in a way they cannot ignore. They try to tell themselves it's nothing, that it doesn't matter, but deep down they know it's the truth, creeping back into their consciousness. And then one day the truth hits them with full force, overwhelming them in a way they cannot deny. They have lost something irreplaceable. They had assumed that you would always be there, that your presence in their life was a given, a mere entitlement. They believed they could discard you, walk away, and that life would continue without any real consequence. But now, as the days go on, they can no longer ignore the emptiness left behind. The space you once filled is now a cavern, hollow and aching. They see now that they were never truly in control. They thought they were making the decisions, but in truth they were only given a test of their character, their priorities, their understanding of what mattered. And they failed. Now, there is no turning back, no undoing what has already been done. The past cannot be rewritten. The things they once took for granted are now beyond their reach. They will try, of course. They will search for ways to reconnect, to find some path back to what they lost. But what they do not understand, what they fail to grasp, is that when God removes someone from your life, it is not a temporary lesson. It is a final judgment. This is the reality they never anticipated. The very thing they dismissed with arrogance is now the very thing they crave. The presence they once mocked, now haunting them in its absence. The peace they once knew, the calm they once took for granted, is now unattainable, no matter how desperately they search for it in the wrong places. They may never say it aloud. Their pride will never allow them to admit the depth of their regret. but in the quiet moments, in the spaces where no one can see their vulnerability, when they are alone with their thoughts, they will feel the full weight of what they lost. They will look back, and with painful clarity, they will see every opportunity they had to change, every moment when they could have done things differently, every time they ignored the warning that God placed in front of them, trying to guide them toward redemption, and it will be too late. The truth will remain unshakable and undeniable. They will have to face it on their own, with no way to escape it. The price of their actions is a burden they will carry, and no matter how many distractions they try to throw in their path, nothing will ever fill the space they once occupied in their life. They will live with the realization that they had everything, and they threw it all away. And that truth will follow them, always present, a reminder of their blindness and error. As we reflect on the journey of understanding the weight of our actions and the consequences of dismissing the blessings in our lives, one thing becomes clear: the truth always finds its way to the surface. We've learned that when we treat others as replaceable, when we take for granted the grace and love that comes into our lives, we risk losing something irreplaceable. We may not always recognize the value of what we have until it's gone, but the opportunity to make things right is often lost in the wake of our pride and selfishness. So, what have you learnt from today's message? What resonated with you the most? Think about one thing you will take away from this video and bring into practice in your life moving forward. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below this video. And remember, if you liked this video, don't forget to leave your comment, give us a thumbs up, share it with those who may need to hear this message, and subscribe to our channel for more insightful content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.